You could also get asked, in rivers, how does a floodplain form? Now, do you even know what a floodplain is? It's basically the area of land either side of the river. So you can see. Now, how has this floodplain formed? We will find out, but they generally form along or near meanders. Okay, so let's look. So before we go into the steps, which you can pause and write out and memorize, and you will have access to these PowerPoints, you need to remember one thing. This river often will flood, okay? When I say flood, I mean the whole picture you can see in front of you will be underwater. That's because when the river overflows, the meanders will burst their banks. Now, what I want you to understand is there is something inside this river which is called silt, or essentially mud, which is kind of like very, let's say, fertile kind of soil and mud. What you need to understand is all of that silt or fertile mud I spoke about will eventually, when the river floods, kind of almost spread out from the river itself and go all across this land that you can see, which therefore almost deposits onto the land and creates these floodplains. But let's go into the steps. So you quickly want to go into saying what are floodplains. They are kind of these wide areas of low-lying land that you find on the lower course, okay? But very quickly, I said that they are found where, or form essentially where meanders move across a floodplain, because without meanders, because remember meanders create that lateral erosion and they kind of like allow this land to form on either side of the river, and without meanders they won't flood, so therefore you won't get floodplains. You must mention that they form due to meanders. Step 3 is essential. You must mention how the river constantly floods and the materials of the silt I was talking about earlier carried in this river gets deposited on the floodplain as silt. Lastly, you want to mention how this continues to happen over time. This allows the kind of like floodplain to build up over time because there's constant deposition from the river flooding, and therefore this becomes a very rich, fertile green area like the photo I showed you earlier, because there's lots of minerals from the river basically dumped onto the land, creating a floodplain.